Today we will begin reading on page 192 and we will read through page 198. Where we left off was when Esperanza and Miguel had been to visit Mama in the hospital. The doctor had told Esperanza that Mama had contracted pneumonia and couldn't have any visitors until she's better. And of course, Esperanza insisted on seeing her mom for just a few minutes. And so the doctor agreed to that for just a few minutes. And then Miguel took her back to the camp. And there, Hortensia saw that Esperanza was feeling very dejected about her mother. And so she suggested that Esperanza and Miguel go to the market on Saturday to Mr. Yakota's store. Mr. Yakota was the store owner who was smart enough to treat everyone with dignity so that they wanted to come back and shop at his store. At Mr. Yakota's store, Esperanza bought a small piñata, thinking that that might cheer Mama up. And then on the way back to camp, the truck stopped for Marta and her mother, Ada. At the bottom of page 191, as Marta and her mother are getting in the wagon, as Ada and Marta were getting in the truck, Ada said, "I've heard about your mother and I'm praying for her." And of course, Esperanza was surprised, but she was also touched by that. And Miguel asks, "Are you coming to our camp?" So now we begin at the top of page 192. "No," said Marta. "As you probably know, I'm not welcome there. We're going a mile or so up the road to the strikers' farm. We were tossed out of the migrant workers' camp and were told either to go back to work or leave. So we left. We aren't going to work under those disgusting conditions and for those pitiful wages." Ada was quiet and nodded when Marta talked about the strike. Esperanza felt a twinge of envy when she noticed that Marta never let go of her mother's hand. "There are hundreds of us together at this farm, but thousands around the county, and more people join our cause each day. You're new here, but in time you'll understand what we're trying to change. Turn left," she said, pointing to a dirt road rutted with tire marks. Miguel turned down the path bordered in cotton fields. Finally, they reached several acres of land surrounded by chain-link fencing and barbed wire, its single opening guarded by several men wearing armbands. "Aquí, right here," said Ada. "What are the guards for?" asked Esperanza. "Oh, they're for protection," said Marta. "The farmer who owns the land is sympathetic to us, but a lot of people don't like the strikers causing trouble. We've had threats. The men take turns at the entrance." Miguel pulled the truck to the side of the road and stopped. There were only 10 wooden toilet stalls for hundreds of people, and Esperanza could smell the effects from the truck. Some people lived in tents, but others had only burlap bags stretched between poles. Some were living in their cars or old trucks. Mattresses were on the ground where people and dogs rested. A goat was tied to a tree. There was a long pipe that lay on top of the ground and a line of water spigots sticking up from it. Near each spigot were pots and pans and campfire rings, the makings of outdoor kitchens. In an irrigation ditch, women were washing clothes and children were bathing at the same time. Clotheslines ran everywhere. It was a great jumble of humanity and confusion. So we can see that this camp that Marta and her mother live in is very different from the camp that Esperanza is privileged to live in. So Esperanza is beginning to get a glimpse into these terrible living conditions that the strikers are so upset about. At the top of page 194, Esperanza could not stop looking. She felt hypnotized by the squalor, but Marta and her mother didn't seem the least bit embarrassed. So what do you think the word squalor means? Squalor means that things are very, very dirty. "Home, sweet home," said Marta. They all climbed out of the truck, but before Marta and Ada could retrieve their groceries, A campesina family came from the opposite direction, approaching them. The children were dirty and skinny, and the mother held an infant who was crying. "Do you have food so that I can feed my family?" said the father. "We were thrown out of our camp because I was striking. My family has not eaten in 2 days. There are too many people coming into the valley each day who will work for pennies. Yesterday I worked all day and made less than 50 cents, and I cannot buy food for one day with that. I was hoping that here, with others who have been through the same—" "Oh, you are welcome here," said Ada. Esperanza reached into the truck bed and opened the large bag of beans. "Hand me your hat, senor." Page 195. The man handed over his large sun hat, and she filled it with the dried beans, then gave it back to him. "Gracias, gracias," he said. Esperanza looked at the two older children, their eyes watery and vacant. She lifted the piñata and held it out to them. They said nothing but hurried toward her, took it, and ran back to their family. So what we see here is Esperanza continuing to mature. The more she is exposed to these terrible conditions that Marta and her family live in, and these other families there, and the more she sees how terribly and desperately poor these people are, the more sympathetic she can be to their situations and their struggles in their life. And so she is no longer that selfish little girl who was worried about her doll getting dirty. She has become and is becoming selfless and aware of the needs of other people, and aware that she actually has the power to make other people happy and to make a positive difference in her life or in their lives. So she didn't even hesitate to give the piñata that she had bought for her mom to these poor children to improve, their spirits and to make them happier. And of course, to give food to this man who is struggling so hard to feed his family. Marta looked at her. "Are you sure you aren't already on our side?" Esperanza shook her head. "They were hungry, that's all. Even if I believed in what you're doing, I must take care of my mother." Ada put her hand on Esperanza's arm and smiled. "We all do what we have to do. Your mother would be proud of you." Miguel handed them their bags, and they walked toward the farmer's field. Before they reached the gate, Marta suddenly turned and said, "I shouldn't be telling you this, but the strikers are more organized than they appear. In a few weeks, during asparagus, things are going to happen all over the county. We're going to shut down everything, the fields, the sheds, the railroad. If you have not joined us by then, be very careful." And then she hurried to catch up with her mother. As Miguel and Esperanza rode back to Arvin, neither of them said a word for many miles. Marta's threat and the guilt of having a job weighed heavily on Esperanza's mind. "Do you think they are right?" she asked. So here's Esperanza riding along, just thinking about her situation and the situation of the people in Marta's camp, and the fact that it sounds as though Esperanza and her family may be in some sort of danger if they don't join the strike and they continue to work. But at the same time, she wants Abuelita here. She has to continue to work tirelessly to earn money to send to Abuelita to get her to California. So she's just weighing all these different situations in her mind and asks Miguel, "Do you think they're right?" This is the middle of page 196. "I don't know," said Miguel. "What the man said is true. I've heard that there will be 10 times the people here looking for jobs in the next few months, from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and other places too. And that there are poor people like us who need to feed their families too. If so many come and are willing to work for pennies, what will happen to us? But until then, with so many joining the strikes, I might be able to get the job at the railroad." Esperanza's mind wrestled with Miguel's words. For him, the strike was an opportunity to work at the job he loved and to make it in this country. But for her, it was a threat to her finances and to Abuelita's arrival and Mama's recuperation. Then there was the matter of her own safety. She thought of Mama and Abuelita and she knew that there was only one thing for her to do. Page 197. Esperanza studied her hands a few nights later as she walked toward the cabin and hoped Hortensia had a few more avocados. It was later than usual. She had been weeding asparagus in a far field, so she had been on the last truck. When she arrived at the cabin, everyone was crowded around the small table. There were fresh tortillas on a plate, and Hortensia was stirring a pan of machaca, scrambled eggs with shredded meat, onions, and peppers. It was Miguel's favorite, but they usually ate it for breakfast. "What is the occasion?" asked Esperanza. "I got a job in the machine shop at the railroad." "Oh, Miguel, that's good news." Page 198. "So many railroad workers have joined the strikers. I know it might be temporary, but if I do a good job, maybe they will keep me." "That is right," said Alfonso. "You do good work. They will see it. They will keep you." Esperanza sat down and listened to Miguel tell the others about the job, but she wasn't hearing his words. She was seeing his eyes, dancing like Papa's when he used to talk about the land. She watched Miguel's animated face, thinking that at last his dream was coming true. So we see that Esperanza continues to make comparisons between Papa and Miguel, and he is like Papa in many ways. He protects her in some ways. He also pushes her to grow and to believe in herself and her abilities. And she is excited for him that he now has his job at the railroad.